Hey, what is going on, everybody? Toddzilla here with Zilla Fantasy Elite, looking at the adjusted line play report for a Thursday night theory session. So, we're going to try to go over in depth one of these island games to hopefully explain what we're looking at when we see these offensive line and defensive line plays. We're always told, hey, the play in the trenches is what wins and loses games. So why do we not look at the play in the trenches when we're trying to determine who to start in fantasy lineups or for prop bets or for any of this stuff? So that's the whole point of this. And my assessment of what these numbers mean, you can certainly look at the numbers and see what the outcomes of these games are when they happen and take all the different factors into consideration and say, actually, based off of what I see, maybe a little bit something different than what I see. Perfectly fine, but just trying to give everybody the tools necessary to look at these and make their own assessments if that may be the case. So we're going to look at that. Very important. Vegas game total 36.5. That's really low. Anything approaching 40 is really low. Anything below 40 is terrible. So this Vegas game total at 36.5. Already that's telling us if these offenses don't score and this is an island game, our defenses are going to be in play. We do have a Vegas game line of 3. For Pittsburgh being the favorite, that's pretty standard. Home team, if the two teams are very evenly matched, the home team just gets an automatic 3-point favorite pretty much in Vegas's eyes. So that's kind of what they're seeing here. That means Pittsburgh has a 19.75 team implied total, Tennessee 16.75. All right, Vegas line out of the way. That does play into account, for these island games in terms of who do you want to be starting. Low game total, and if that comes to fruition, you're probably going to want some defenses or maybe some kickers into your island game lineup if you want to win the tournament. All right, so getting into the Tennessee side, we're going to look at offensive pass situation first. For the home team, we have offensive pass protection here on the left. For those of you not familiar, it's an adjusted sack rate. So Tennessee 30th in adjusted sack rate, Pittsburgh number 6. So adjusted sack rate really looks at what time are you getting sacks. So let's say two teams evenly at 25 sacks throughout the whole season. Are those 25 sacks created equal? Perhaps not. Maybe this other team finds itself in a lot of scenarios where the opposing offense is in 3rd and 18 and they have an opportunity where they know they're going to be passing a lot more frequently. So in those situations, it's very good if you get a sack. That's a bonus. But it doesn't really mean as much for your defense and how good they are at getting sacks as, let's say, it's 1st and 5. That's a situation where you probably normally run. You would be probably playing the run. If you get a sack in a situation like that, that's going to be worth more than a sack when it's 3rd and 18, or maybe at the end of the game when it's 4th and 25. Those aren't going to count for nearly as much as a sack in a different situation where you wouldn't expect a sack. So the left numbers for the pass protection, all adjusted sack rate. The DVOAs on the right side, those are kind of, if you want to think about it as overall pass game effectiveness or efficiency, explosiveness or touchdown scoring, fantasy scoring, kind of all of that. It's taking into consideration historical aspects of what happens on a play. So if it's the second quarter with 10 minutes left and you're at your own 42-yard line and it's 2nd and 8, what does a typical play, a pass play on that particular scenario look like? Hey, there's a 67% success rate at a pass gaining 8 yards. If you gain 9 yards, you're above what is typical for that particular scenario. You're going to have a better DVOA. If you get sacked in that scenario, you're going to have a worse DVOA. You can kind of think of the DVOA aspect like that. Compared to historical averages, where do you sit? Plus or minus type of deal, and then the rank of that. So taking that into consideration, we have Tennessee, very high adjusted sack rate. Pittsburgh, very good in the adjusted sack rate. They're top 6. So what that means is we would expect Pittsburgh to generate a lot of sacks in this, probably a lot of pressure as well. If they're getting sacks, they're probably pretty good at getting pressure. But again, this is not a pressure rate. The DVOA aspect will let us know like the overall pass game. Sure, they're going to be under some duress here, but how good is the pass game overall? Well, Tennessee's number 21, Pittsburgh top 10 at number 9. That's a pretty big gap in Pittsburgh's favor as well. So I would expect Pittsburgh to be able to generate some sacks here and Tennessee not to move the ball very well in the air. This is a pretty big gap here, 9 and 21. Probably not going to be a very good game for the Tennessee pass game. And we saw Will Levis really struggle with turnovers and getting sacked in his senior year when things were kind of broken down in front of him with the offensive line. That could play into account in terms of Pittsburgh defense. We already have a low Vegas game total. Does Pittsburgh defense want to make it into our lineup? It's probably a good play. Not a ton of people put a defense into their captain spot, but it is a pretty common tactic that people use to try to get unique and win the tournament. So it happens probably more than you would expect. Anyway, don't expect Tennessee's pass game to be very good. Expect them to be uncomfortable in the pocket. And a lot of times if there's a lot of pressure up front, that's going to lead to quicker passes or a need to get the ball out quicker. That's going to lead to dump offs either to the running backs or the tight ends or any underneath route runners. I don't really know who that is in Tennessee outside of Kyle Phillips and the tight ends. Running routes there. Tajay Spears obviously is the running back who gets a lot of the pass down work. So I don't hate him in this particular matchup based off of the pass catching prowess, especially on DraftKings where you get a full point. And just looking at the Vegas game total, there's probably not going to be a ton of fantasy points scored. So those 1-point receptions are going to count even more in a situation like this. So that's going to be how we attack the pass game. Let's go into Tennessee's run game, see how we attack run games on the adjusted line play report. This first one, offensive run blocking, number 9 for Tennessee, number 25 for Pittsburgh. That's a pretty big benefit there for Tennessee. Again, this is kind of an adjusted rate in terms of how good the offensive line play is. And the rating for this kind of goes in terms of, was it a negative run play? So if you get it -1 or less than 0 yards rushing on your attempt, that's going to be highly attributed to the offensive line. Hey, it's not really the running back's fault that somebody's getting blasted, before they can even make it to the line of scrimmage or as they're catching the ball or grabbing the ball from the quarterback. If they're getting blown up, that's on the offensive line. That's going to count really bad for their run blocking unit. Then you get 0 to 2 yards. That's going to count a little bit better than a -1, but still, you're not providing holes for your running back to get very far. And then once you get kind of further up the chain, it's kind of weighted in that sense in terms of tiers. It's like, hey, that was really bad. That's on the offensive line. That was a negative play. That's not on the running back. And then as you progressively get further and further, maybe these 10-yard ones, sure, they opened a gap, but your running back was probably also very talented and got some of those yards and created those on their own. So that's, kind of scaled in that direction. What this is saying is Tennessee's probably going to have some very positive yardage on any given run scenario. They're probably not going to have a lot of yards for loss, tackles for loss when they run. They're probably going to be getting decent chunks, 2 to 5 yards every single time that they touch the ball. The DVOA aspect, similar to the past DVOA, where it's taking into consideration historical aspects. When you ran in this situation in the historical context, 10 minutes left in the second quarter, you're on your own 42, 2nd and 8, right? You decide to run it up the middle. What was the historical average outcome from a scenario like that? Were you better than it? Were you worse than it? That's how the DVOA kind of works. Getting into this, Tennessee is slightly better than Pittsburgh, 11 versus 14. That's telling us, hey, Tennessee should be gaining some decent positive yardage each time they run the ball. But the DVOA aspect, let's just say this was a big favor. Tennessee number 1, Pittsburgh number 32. That's probably telling us that Tennessee is going to be very explosive with their runs as well. Not only will they gain positive chunk yardage, 2-5 yards, but there's a higher opportunity for these big chunk gains, 20, 25, 30 yards plus to happen. This isn't really necessarily suggesting that, but what the interesting aspect is, running backs, it's a very individual aspect. Once you're in space, one-on-one, if you're just better than the person across the ball from you, you're going to be better. So when they're very even up like this, there's no real advantage. What I say in those situations, we've seen the people that normally get the ball or the people that are really good at football tend to do really good in these situations. So if Tennessee's likelihood is to run all the time, Derrick Henry, he's really good at football. We haven't really seen it this year, but this is a situation where he's probably going to be getting a bunch of positive yardage. They're struggling passing the ball. This DVOA aspect is pretty even, but he could be a lot better than the defense around him. So I don't hate him in this game either. It's just kind of weird. In a game like this, the Tennessee side, I may be looking at Spears and Henry both in a lineup. That's going to be a little bit different. That's going to be a little bit weird compared to what most people are ever going to put in. I see Spears getting these dump offs. All those points count. And then Tennessee really being most effective moving the ball via the run. So Tennessee's fantasy points are probably going to mostly come from that run game or some of these short dump off passes. That's how I'm going to attack the Tennessee side. And really, once you get into some of these island games, if you're looking to win, it would be really unique to have two running backs from the same team in there. And that could be a strategy that you utilize to maybe take down a tournament this week. All right. So now that we kind of understand, hopefully, pass and run blocking, let's go look at the home team here, Pittsburgh. In their pass rush, we have Tennessee ranked number 10, Pittsburgh number 24. This is pretty similar to the other one where Pittsburgh's defense was dominating. I'd expect Tennessee to be able to generate some sacks on Pittsburgh. We already know that there's been some issues with injuries with Pickett that could play into effect here. Getting a backup quarterback, Trubisky, probably as solid as you can get in terms of backup quarterbacks, but obviously he's a backup for a reason. So take that into consideration. Probably not going to be super comfortable in the pocket. Could be a situation where they're going to be taking some sacks and need to, if they're under pressure, get the ball out a little bit quicker. So underneath passes, that's gone to Deontay Johnson and Pat Freiermuth in the past. Pat Freiermuth on IR, so you can kind of X him out. I don't think Darnell Washington's somebody that you're really interested in this week as a pass catcher. So I think Deontay Johnson just going to get a lot of those dump-off targets. Jaylen Warren as well. I see him, getting a little bit more involved in this, catching some passes in scenarios like this where there might be a little bit of pressure. So defensive pass DVOA, that's a little bit even here. So Pittsburgh 23, Tennessee 25. That's really saying Tennessee's pass DVOA is really bad, 25th. Pittsburgh's offense is also really bad in terms of DVOA and what's normally expected. In situations like this, I like to say, hey, even though these are, bad, Pittsburgh's bad on offense, they might find the pass game a little bit easier than they're used to move the ball. Sure, they might be under pressure, but they're probably going to be fairly effective at moving the ball. This is probably indicative that the pass rush is good, but that secondary is pretty poor in Tennessee. So getting those Pittsburgh pass catchers, Pickens and Deontay Johnson, is what I'm going to be looking at in terms of island defense. I think Pittsburgh will be okay moving the ball. There's just going to be scenarios where they're probably going to have to get it out a little bit quicker, and they might be under a little bit of pressure in this particular matchup. All right, getting into the run blocking side, we have Tennessee's run stopping at number 16, Pittsburgh number 27 in offensive run blocking. This tells me that there's going to be a lot of stuff right at the line of scrimmage. Najee Harris probably not going to be very effective in a game like this because he doesn't get necessarily involved in the pass game very much with Jaylen Warren there. So he's going to be trying to pound the rock and not being super effective doing that. There's probably going to be some behind the line of scrimmage action and a lot of 0 to 3, 0 to 4 yard rushes in his future this Thursday night. And unfortunately for Pittsburgh, it gets even worse with the DVOA. So Tennessee's actually number 2 in run DVOA, meaning they're really good at stopping the run. Pittsburgh, number 26 in the run DVOA, really bad. So it's a red-green matchup, as I like to say. But really, this is telling me Pittsburgh's not going to move the ball very well while running it at all. So Najee relying mostly on the ground attack to create fantasy points, probably going to be out of my list. He can certainly fall into the end zone in a game with a low Vegas game total and make it work in an island game. But really, the touchdowns were volatile. I'm okay passing on that particular aspect happening, completely fading Najee in island game like this week. So that's how I'm going to attack it. I have also known in situations like this where the pass game is going to be okay, good, not great, or even like not above average. but just right there in the middle. And then this run game is kind of struggling. Situations like this, we might see Pittsburgh, hey, yep, we have 3 to 5 drives in this particular game that we make it into the opposing opponent's territory, but then that drive stalls out because you can't really run the ball. The field gets squeezed a little bit. I do like Pittsburgh's kicker this week in terms of having 2 or 3 of those. If you're going to be placing prop bets on that, you can bet him to have 2. A lot of times that line is set at 1.5. Is he going to score 2 field goals? I feel pretty comfortable with him doing that this week. So, Island DFS, how am I going to attack this Pittsburgh game? It's going to be the pass catchers, Jaylen Warren, and then Pickens and Deontay Johnson for me over there in Pittsburgh. Certainly you can get somebody like an Allen Robinson who has a one-off game. Maybe he catches 4 for 50 and grabs the 1 touchdown that Pittsburgh scores this week. Certainly within the realm of possibilities. But the ones that I'm really interested in for Island DFS, Tyjae Spears, Derrick Henry, Pittsburgh kicker, Pittsburgh defense, Deontay Johnson, if I didn't say him already, and Pickens, yeah. So that's the route I'm going to go. I think Tennessee's defense is also certainly in play here, where they're going to be stopping Pittsburgh's run, and maybe to the point where Pittsburgh's just going to pass more, and certainly could lead to some more sacks, turnover opportunities. I like Pittsburgh's opportunity for more sacks and more turnover opportunities. They also might run the ball a little bit more, so take that into consideration. But I think both defenses certainly in play, especially with the Vegas game total where it's at. All right. Hopefully you learned a little bit about Thursday Night Football, the matchup, how the adjusted line play report works. Hopefully you can go out there, place a few prop bets, place your DFS lineups, win some money on that tournament. If you do, give me a shout out, send me a message. I love hearing about that stuff. So really appreciate it. If you are a new subscriber, congratulations. Hopefully you learned a little bit on this. And thanks for stopping in. Thanks for tuning in. Let's go win some money together. Let me know. Thanks. Bye.